Hello and welcome to another episode of the Imagine a Life podcast. I'm Frances LaCuesta and I'm your host. So today I want to talk about, and this is inspired by the expression, there's always something. And let me tell you a bit of a backstory as to where this came about. So I was at the dentist about a few weeks ago. And I was really prepared and ready for my dentist appointment because maybe for some of you, going to the dentist is like a terrifying experience. Okay. So in the same way for me, even if it's just having the cleaning, for example, it terrifies me. So anyway, I got in there and I got all like really calm and prepared for that session. Anyway, my dentist, um, she was running late. And so I was already waiting for her on the chair for more than 30 minutes, possibly. And she's not yet there. Okay. Anyway, when she came in, she was in a very harried look. And then she started telling me why she was late and what happened. And so the way she said it was that, oh, this is what happened. Like, oh, I'm late because, I there's traffic and then it started raining, like raining so hard, and now there's like flooding, and then I couldn't get enough parking, and then, things, et cetera, et cetera. A lot of things. She told the story in a lot more ways than that. And then she said this, there's always something. And it kind of stuck with me because I also heard that expression in this TV series from Netflix called Beef. If you haven't watched it yet, check it out. But anyway, in Beef, it's they used it. The two main characters said that same expression on the series, and that kind of where it started everything for them. And again, it stuck with me. So maybe that when my dentist used that, it kind of like, hey, it triggered something in me and said, you know what, I'm using the same thing, right, for myself. And I hear that a lot with other people. And so I looked it up, and true enough, right? That expression, there's always something, has a negative connotation. And so it's used when, as in the case or example with what my dentist, with the story of my dentist, and she was saying about, her day started out well, and then this happened, right? And it all just about the negative events that happened. And so I looked it up, and that's exactly what it's about. It's like, oh, my day went well, and then shit happens. And so on my end, I became aware with it, and I was like being conscious about how I use it. And I'm just like wondering for myself, it's like, is this how I use it too? That when I say or use this expression, is it because something negative happened? And true enough, it is. And so I thought about it and my using of it, and I realized that, there is something, I have like a reaction, like a visceral reaction towards it whenever I use it, because I feel like whenever I use the expression, it's like I am feeling victimized, or it's like I lose my power. Like I feel it in my body. And so there is that, that kind of like resignation, and I feel like a little drooping of my shoulders, and I feel it like here in my tummy, and it's not very comfortable. And so I'm like, hmm, how is that so? And why am I feeling this way? And so that kind of like, a little bit of like sleuthing. And that's why I wanted to talk to you about this topic. And so the thing about that is, as humans, we are hardwired for negativity. And so even if, positive or even neutral things that are happening to us, let's say in a day, we tend to remember, not just that, we remember the negative things that happen to us more than the positive, more than the neutral, because that's just how we are made. Um, and so it's the same way for this the use of this expression. It stemmed from that. It stemmed from all of this, not so pleasant things that happened to you. And so I'm like, okay, so how do we, knowing this, that humans react more strongly to negative stimuli, knowing this, how do I now take it into a more like positive spin and reframe it in a way that, when something unpleasant happens, how do I make it into something that I won't say it in a negative way? There's always something, right? So I thought of like the three things that work for me, may or may not work for you, but I want to share this with you anyway. And so, um, and so these are the three things that I wanted to share with you. The first thing is, when something unpleasant do happen, and yes, it does, the first thing is to acknowledge that there's really always something because we're humans. And as long as you're alive, something is happening in your life. And so these are things that we have no control with, especially the external factors. But what we can control is within. Okay. So our attitude towards it. How do you react? How do you respond if something happens that is not to your liking? If your plan doesn't go the way you want it to be, or if, you were late at work and a lot of things happened in between, what's your attitude towards it? How do you respond towards what happens? And instead of saying, you know, in a resigned way, there's always something. Maybe say it, okay, I know something is always happening because I'm alive and I'm human. So I'm experiencing things all the time. All right. So the first thing, acknowledge that there's always something. All right. Second, Second is I borrowed this from comedian Jerry Seinfeld. And so this is from his commemoration speech in Duke University. And this is just fairly recent. So the second is do not lose your sense of humor. And I quote Jerry Seinfeld. He said, "You can have no idea at this point in your life how much you're going to need it to get through," meaning the sense of humor. "Not enough of life makes sense for you to be able to survive it without humor." And he added, "Humor is the most powerful, most survival essential quality you will ever have or need to navigate through the human experience." And I couldn't agree more. So this one is um, knowing, acknowledging that there is always something, right? Good, bad, neutral. And when things happen that is not to how you want it to be, maybe put a little bit of like lightness to it. You know, there are some things in life that we really have to take in all seriousness, right? But a lot of things in life, something that we can like, see it on on a lighter note, right? Not too much seriousness, but maybe looking at it with playfulness and with a lot of humor. Find find the funny in it, right? And he even like say it in a way like, the dumbness of it all, right? So sometimes um we also, it helps us just have that kind of little bit of playfulness and humor into it. All right, so that's the second one. Do not lose your sense of humor. Third is, and this for me, I use this a lot. Okay, so third is to, when something is not to your liking, when something not so good happens, just breathe, pause, And then instead of using there's always something in a very resigned way, maybe use these two terms instead. It's, oh, isn't that interesting? Or you can also say, how fascinating, right? And so it's like looking at it in a way that also plays to number two, which is about humor and playfulness and lightness. It's looking at it in a way like, oh, look, will you look at that? Right? It's an observer. And it's like you dissociating from what is exactly going on and just looking at it in a more like light tone. Like, oh, isn't this interesting that I am in traffic and it's not moving and I am late for my appointment, right? So I know that sometimes maybe it's like you have that, you're irritated or you're annoyed and all that thing. But see if you can put that in there too, and just look at it in that light. And it's also about playing here. What story, right? What story are you bringing in, right? So what are you bringing whenever that like being stuck in traffic, for example? So what goes on in your mind? Is it the traffic or is it like deeper than that, right? So it's clarifying what's fact, what is the story behind it too, and where do you go, right? So whenever you say or whenever you go through something, right, and it's not a very pleasant event for you, where do you go and what do you say to yourself? Okay, so it's like, do you feel like you're being punished, or do you feel like you're not a good person and that you're being punished for being this? And so there's that victimization that comes in as well. And so when that happens, it's just like, oh, isn't that interesting? I have these thoughts in my head and I'm making it mean this way. And also just looking at this, so how is this helpful for me now in this moment, right? And so number three, breathe, pause, and you can use terms like, how interesting, or isn't it fascinating? Or maybe I mix it up a bit. So, how fascinating, or isn't that interesting? All right. Okay. Um, and so these are the three things that I want to share with you, and I apply uh, in my life. And so I wanted to just share it in, if it, something that you wanted to apply to, and also maybe if it's something useful for you. Again, this is not, it's not one size fit all. I understand that. However, so just take what you need, and if it resonates with you, or take nothing, right? So anyway, I am, with all of that said, I am so grateful for you, for listening to the podcast, for watching this. And if you want more, I also write at francislacuesta.substack.com. And of course, if you listen to this in Apple Podcasts, you can always leave a review. And I would love to hear from you. So if you have any, practical tips and tools that you also want to add on this topic, if this happens to you a lot, or if you have used or applied what I've shared to you in this episode, then feel free to DM me, let me know. I would love to hear from you. All right. So until next time, bye for now.